Revenge with Karen.
You know that sound when a car engine creates a low, rhythmic thrum just before a piston decides to violently exit the block? That's the sound of my life at Gracepen Industries. Most people hear noise. I hear a symphony of impending disaster that only I know how to conduct. I'm Elaine. I'm 58 years old. I have a spine curved slightly to the left from 30 years of leaning over conveyor relays. I possess the kind of legacy knowledge that corporate headhunters call invaluable right before they try to lowball you on a severance package. It was a Tuesday. Tuesdays in a Michigan stamping plant smell like ozone and burnt hydraulic fluid. It's a perfume you can't buy at Sephora. And frankly, it smells better than the desperation radiating off the new management team. I was standing at Station 4 on Line 3. Line 3 is my problem child. He's a 20-year-old Kuker robotics assembly that likes to drift out of sync if the humidity in the plant drops below 40%. I don't look at a dashboard to know this. I feel it in the floorboards. The vibration changes from a waltz to a stumble. I was tightening a sensor bracket, a quarter turn, not a millimeter more, or the optical reader throws a fit when I felt a presence. You know the type. It wasn't the heavy, plodding tread of a shift worker in steel toes. It was the frantic, clicking tap dance of expensive Italian loafers that have never touched anything grittier than a plush conference room carpet. I didn't turn around. "You're standing in the yellow zone," I said to the air. "Unless you're rated for high-voltage maintenance, you're about 3 inches from voiding your life insurance policy." Elaine, right? The legacy specialist. I turned then. It was Troy, our new operations director. Looked like he was freshly hatched from an MBA incubator. Smooth skin, teeth that were suspiciously white, and a suit that cost more than my first car. He was holding a tablet like it was Moses' stone tablet, and he was looking at my grease-stained coveralls with a mixture of amusement and mild disgust. He looked like the kind of guy who calls a hard day's work a 90-minute Zoom call where the Wi-Fi lagged. "Systems specialist," I corrected, wiping a smudge of lithium grease onto a rag that had seen better decades. "And you must be the new optimization guru corporate sent down to explain to us why we need to do more with less." "Try," he said, offering a hand that looked soft enough to bruise if I gripped it too hard. I didn't take it. I just held up my oily wrench. He retracted the hand, wiping it on his pants reflexively. "And actually, Elaine, it's director of modernization. We're looking to pivot." Pivot is the word of the quarter. "Pivot," I repeated. The word tasted like aluminum foil. "Is that fancy talk for fixing things that aren't broken?" He laughed. It was a hollow, dry sound like shaking a box of uncooked pasta. "That's the thing about legacy mindsets, Elaine. You see not broken. I see inefficient. I've been reviewing the logs. You spend 40% of your time on manual overrides for Line 3. That's wasted bandwidth. Need automation that automates the automation." I stared at him. I wanted to explain that Line 3 wasn't just a machine. It was a collection of quirks and patches that had evolved over 2 decades. I wanted to explain that the manual overrides were me finessing a firmware conflict that the original manufacturer stopped supporting when Bush was in office. But I knew he wouldn't hear me. He was listening to the podcast in his head, where he's the hero who saves the quarterly earnings report. "Hey, real quick, before I get into how this suit tried to dismantle my life's work, if you're into stories about blue-collar folks serving cold justice to corporate clowns, go ahead and hit subscribe. Maybe drop a like if you've ever had a boss who couldn't find a screwdriver in a hardware store. It helps the team keep these stories coming." "All right, back to the grime." "We have a meeting in 20 minutes, Troy said, tapping his tablet. "All senior staff. I'm unveiling the roadmap. I think you'll find it illuminating." "I'll be there," I said, as soon as I convinced Line 3 not to eat the next pallet of sheet metal. He walked away, stepping delicately over a coil of pneumatic hose like it was a viper. I watched him go. My gut tightened. It wasn't the usual stress of the job, looming deadlines or the parts shortages. It was something colder. It was the feeling you get when you see a storm front rolling in over the lake, gray, heavy, and inevitable. I finished the adjustment on the sensor. The line hummed back into a perfect rhythm. Thrum-click-whoosh, thrum-click-whoosh. It was music. I patted the safety cage. "Don't worry, girl," I whispered. "I won't let the shiny man hurt you." But as I walked toward the conference room, wiping my hands with aggressive force, I couldn't shake the feeling. I stopped by my locker. Inside, hidden behind a stack of manuals for a PLC system that went obsolete in 2012, was a small, unassuming USB drive. I don't know why I kept it there. Maybe paranoia, maybe intuition. It was a backup of a backup, a ghost image of the entire plant's logic architecture that I had compiled over years. It contained every patch, every workaround, every line of spaghetti code that held this rust bucket together. I looked at it. Then, for the first time in 5 years, I took it out of the locker and slipped it into my pocket. It felt heavy, like a loaded gun. The conference room was air-conditioned to a frigid 68 degrees. The rest of the old guard was there, Miguel from maintenance, Sarah from QC, and Big Dave, the floor foreman. They all looked tired, looked like people who knew the axe was swinging, but didn't know whose neck was on the block. Troy stood at the head of the table. Behind him, a PowerPoint presentation glowed with words like synergy, holistic, and right-sizing. Welcome, team, Troy beamed. He didn't sit, he paced. I've spent the last 2 weeks observing, and I have to be honest, I'm shocked. Shocked at the reliance on tribal knowledge. He said tribal knowledge the way you'd say sewage leak, have critical dependencies on single individuals. He continued, his eyes sliding over to me. If Elaine here gets hit by a bus, line 3 stops. If Miguel wins the lottery, the HVAC dies. This is unacceptable risk. We are moving to a fully standardized, cloud-based ERP system. No more manual patches, no more magic touch. We are digitizing the floor. Miguel raised a hand. His knuckles were scarred and thick. Sir, with all due respect, Cloud doesn't know that the hydraulic seals on press 4 expand differently in January than they do in July. The sensors don't catch that. We do. Troy smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. That's exactly the problem, Miguel. You're relying on feel. We need data, and we're going to get it. Starting today, we are auditing all contracts. We are looking for redundancies. The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed. I sat perfectly still, hand in my pocket, fingers brushing against the cool plastic of the USB drive. Elaine, Troy said, and the room seemed to shrink. Since your role is primarily maintenance of legacy systems, and since we are eliminating those legacy systems, HR will be setting up a meeting with you later today to discuss your transition. Transition, I said flatly. It's a standard review, he said, waving a hand dismissively. Just paperwork, but we need to look at the budget. We're an expensive luxury, Elaine. In the modern age, we don't need artisans, we need operators. I didn't blink, I didn't scream. I didn't throw my chair through the window, even though the urge was strong enough to taste like copper in my mouth. I just nodded slowly. Understood, I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. Even I was surprised by it. Great. Troy clapped his hands. Out with the old, in with the new. Meeting adjourned. As the team filed out, Gel squeezed my shoulder. He looked like he wanted to punch something. Elaine, this is horse shit, he muttered. It's okay, Miguel, I said, and a small, razor-sharp smile touched my lips. He wants to modernize. He wants to see what the factory looks like without the tribal knowledge. I think we should let him. I walked out of that room with my head high. I went back to my desk, a cluttered corner of the engineering bay piled high with schematics and old coffee cups. I sat down at my terminal. Troy thought he was firing an employee. He didn't realize he was pulling the control rods out of a nuclear reactor. I brought up the command console. My fingers flew across the keyboard, muscle memory from 30 years of typing in the dark. Copying files, encrypting, status, complete. I wasn't stealing anything. I was just packing up my personal belongings. If those belongings happened to include the only functional map of the system's logic gates, well, that's just intellectual property, isn't it? I leaned back in my chair. The factory floor rumbled beneath me. It sounded different now. It sounded like a beast holding its breath. Okay, Troy, I whispered to the screen. You want to drive? Here are the keys. Hope you know how to drive a stick. HR offices always smell like vanilla air freshener masking the scent of crushed dreams. At Gracepen, the HR department was located in the clean tower, the administrative wing that was physically attached to the factory, but spiritually located on a different planet. The carpet was gray, the walls were beige, and the people were dead behind the eyes. I sat in a chair that was designed to be uncomfortable, presumably to make you want to sign whatever severance agreement they shoved in front of you just so you could leave. Across from me sat Troy and a woman named Jessica from HR. Jessica looked like she was 12 years old and terrified. Troy looked like he was about to win a game of Monopoly. So, Elaine, Troy began, leaning back and tenting his fingers. As we discussed earlier, The pivot to Digital 4.0 renders your specific skill set obsolete. It's not personal, it's evolution. You're like a carburetor in a world of fuel injection. He paused, waiting for me to be impressed by his metaphor. I see, I said. So 32 years of keeping this plant running with 99.8% uptime is? A carburetor? Exactly. He pointed a finger at me like I'd just won a prize. You get it. We need to streamline your contract, which, frankly, is bloated with seniority bonuses. So weight we can't carry if we want to be agile. Jessica pushed a piece of paper across the desk. This is a separation agreement, Elaine. It offers 2 weeks of severance for every 5 years of service, contingent on a non-disparagement clause and a full handover of all company assets. I picked up the paper. The numbers were insulting. It was enough to buy a used Honda, maybe, not enough to cover the hip surgery I'd eventually need from walking on concrete floors since the Reagan administration. And the handover? I asked, looking at Troy. You want me to train the new guys, show them where the bodies are buried? Troy laughed again, that dry, rattling laugh. Elaine, please, we have the documentation, we have the schematics, we don't need lore, we have the cloud. The new team starts Monday. They're certified on the new ERP. I don't need you hovering over their shoulders telling them how you used to fix things with duct tape and prayers. He stood up, walked over to a shredder in the corner, and picked up a folder labeled Contract Renewal E. Miller. He held it up for me to see. This was the proposal for your extension, he said. Digitization, Elaine, it's cleaner. He fed the folder into the shredder. The machine whirred, eating the paper with a satisfying crunch. He smiled at me through the noise. It was theatrical. It was cruel. It was necessary. If he hadn't done that, if he had shown even an ounce of respect, I might have warned him. I might have told him about the thermal runaway on press 6. I might have mentioned that the cooling pumps on the roof need to be rebooted manually after a thunderstorm. But as I watched my future turn into confetti, the last shred of loyalty I had for GracePen Industries vanished. Okay, I said. I signed the separation agreement. Didn't read the fine print. I didn't care. Badge, please, Jessica whispered. I unclipped my ID badge. The photo was from 20 years ago. I looked younger, less tired. I placed it on the desk. And any company data, Troy added. Laptops, drives, keys. I reached into my bag. I pulled out my company phone and my heavy ring of keys to the server room, the electrical cages, the maintenance lifts. I laid them down with a clatter. That's everything, I lied. USB drive in my pocket felt warm against my leg. Excellent, Troy said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. Security will escort you out. Standard procedure. Don't take it personally. I never do, I said. I stood up. My knees popped. I looked Troy dead in the eye. He was tall, but he looked small to me. He looked like a child playing with matches in a fireworks factory. Good luck with the modernization, Troy. The machines, they have a personality. Treat them right. Machines are machines, Elaine, he scoffed. They do what they're coded to do. Yes, I said softly. They certainly do. The walk to the parking lot was the longest walk of my life. A security guard named Kevin, a kid I'd known since he was a rookie, walked beside me. He looked miserable. I'm sorry, Elaine, he mumbled. This is messed up. Who's gonna fix the breaker when it trips in the cafeteria? Troy is an optimizer, Kevin, I said, putting on my sunglasses. I'm sure he'll optimize the breaker. I got to my truck, a beat-up Ford F-150 that had more rust than paint. I threw my personal box in the passenger seat. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I looked back at the massive, gray bulk of the factory. Smoke puffed from the stacks. The hum of the production line vibrated through the asphalt. I pulled my phone out, my personal phone, opened a secure app connected to a remote desktop node I had set up years ago for emergency weekend diagnostics. Troy's IT team had revoked my company credentials, sure, but they hadn't found the backdoor account named Admin Ghost buried in the subdirectory of the legacy lighting control system. Why would they? They were looking for users, not ghosts. I checked the status. System online. User, admin ghost, permissions, root. I didn't do anything. Not yet. Revenge is a dish best served cold, but industrial sabotage needs to simmer. I just needed to make sure the door was unlocked. Goodbye, old girl, I said to the factory. I started the truck. The engine roared to life, drowning out the distant hum of the plant. As I drove away, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I was heading to my sister's place in Traverse City. I was going to drink wine. I was going to sleep in. And I was going to wait for the inevitable phone call. Because here's the thing about legacy systems. They are the foundation. And when you rip out the foundation to put in a shiny new basement, the whole house tends to lean. I gave it 3 days. Maybe 4. I was wrong. It only took 2. The first 24 hours after I left were apparently peaceful. That's the thing about inertia. A heavy flywheel keeps spinning for a while even after you cut the power. Troy probably patted himself on the back, sipping an espresso, thinking he'd successfully amputated the dead weight without spilling a drop of blood. But entropy is a patient hunter. I wasn't there to see it, but Miguel filled me in later over a burner phone. It started on line 2. Line 2 handles the precision welding for the automotive chassis frames. It involves 6 robotic arms dancing around a steel frame, welding spots with millimeter precision. It's a ballet. And like any ballet, if the music stops, dancers crash into each other. Troy initiated the system upgrade at 8 a.m. on Monday. He pushed a button on his shiny tablet that rerouted the logic controls from the local servers, the ones I maintained, to his new cloud-based ERP system. Seamless integration, he had called it. At 10:15 a.m., the timing drift started. It wasn't catastrophic at first, just sluggish. Latency between the cloud server and the physical motors was only 200 milliseconds, but in high-speed manufacturing, 200 milliseconds is an eternity. It's the difference between a perfect weld and a pile of scrap metal. Miguel told me the first sign was the sound. The smooth hiss-pop of the welders turned into a stuttering hiss-hiss-pop. Then, the arms started to hesitate. They looked confused. They were waiting for instructions from a conductor who was asleep at the podium. "Stop the line," Big Dave had shouted. Troy, standing on the observation deck, waved him off. "It's just the calibration phase. The machine learning algorithm is adjusting to the workflow. Let it run." So they let it run. At 10:45 a.m., Arm 4 moved to weld a joint that Arm 2 hadn't placed yet. Instead of welding steel, it welded the empty air, swung around and clipped the safety cage. Sparks showered down like a cheap 4th of July display. The emergency stop triggered. The line groaned to a halt. Silence fell over the floor, that heavy, expensive silence that costs $1,000 a minute. "Maintenance," Troy barked over the intercom. "Get that line moving. What is wrong with the hardware?" That was his first mistake, blaming the hardware. Miguel and his crew swarmed the machine. They checked the motors, checked the voltage. Everything was green. The hardware was fine. The brain was broken. "It's the timing, boss," Miguel yelled up to the deck. "The new system is lagging. We need to revert to the local control loop." "No reverts," Troy shouted, his face turning a shade of red that matched the emergency lights. "The cloud is the standard. Fix the latency on your end. You can't fix the speed of light with a wrench." Miguel shouted back, risking his job. Meanwhile, in the server room, new IT team, a bunch of kids who knew Python but couldn't identify a servo motor if it fell on their foot, were sweating. They were trying to force the new code to overwrite the old logic blocks. But here's the kicker, they couldn't. Every time they tried to delete the old Elaine legacy protocol files, the system denied access. Error 403, forbidden. Admin rights required. Contact system architect. "Who is the system architect?" one of the IT kids asked, typing furiously. "The documentation says." "E. Miller," another one replied, "but her account is deleted." "Then who has the admin keys?" "They didn't have the keys. I had the keys. And I was currently sitting on a porch in Traverse City, 300 miles away, watching a seagull eat a French fry and drinking a cup of tea that didn't taste like coolant." Troy came storming into the server room. "Why is line 2 down? I promised corporate a 15% efficiency boost by noon." "We're locked out," the head IT guy stammered. "There's a ghost in the machine, sir. A legacy partition that controls the critical timing. We can't override it without the root password." "Hack it," Troy screamed. "It's just code. Brute force it. If we brute force it, we might corrupt the safety protocols," the IT guy warned. "The whole system could lock up." "I don't care. We are losing money. Bypass the safety protocols if you have to. Just get the line moving." "Oh, Troy, you sweet summer child. Bypassing safety protocols on a manufacturing line is like taking the brakes off a freight train because they're slowing you down. Sure, you'll go faster for a minute, but the stop is going to be spectacular." Back in Traverse City, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my Ghost app. "Alert. Safety override initiated user. System admin Troy. Warning, thermal limits disabled on press 4. Warning, collision detection disabled on line 2. I stared at the screen. He actually did it. He turned off the safeguards. I took a sip of tea. I could have stopped him. I could have sent a command to re-engage the locks. I could have saved him from himself. But he had shredded my contract. He had called my life's work garbage. Let it burn, I whispered. I put the phone down and went inside to make a sandwich. Show was just starting. You know that specific crunch sound when hardened steel meets? Well, anything it's not supposed to meet. It's a sound that makes your teeth ache. It's the sound of a yearly salary evaporating in a microsecond. At 1:30 p.m., line 2 started up again. Troy had forced the override. He stood on the gantry, arms crossed, looking like a captain steering a ship through a storm, oblivious to the fact that he'd just ordered the crew to scuttle the hull. He announced to the terrified floor staff, "Innovation requires courage. The system works, the robotic arms whirred to life. Without the bloated safety code checking their positions every 4 milliseconds, they moved faster. Smoother. For about 90 seconds, it looked like Troy was a genius. Then, the sensor on Station 5 failed. Normally, under my logic map, a sensor failure triggers a soft halt. The machine slows down, checks the reading again, and if it's still bad, parks itself in a neutral position. It takes 10 seconds. It's annoying, but it's safe. But Troy had bypassed the soft halt. He wanted speed. He wanted continuous flow. So when the sensor failed to report the position of a car door chassis, the robot didn't pause. It assumed the door was where it was supposed to be. It swung a high-torque welding gun forward at 6 feet per second. The door wasn't there, but the hydraulic clamp for the next station was. Crunch wasn't just a bump. The robot arm drove the welder through the clamp, shearing off a titanium bolt and bending the robot's primary axle shaft. The sound was like a gunshot followed by a scream of tearing metal. Hydraulic fluid sprayed across the aisle like arterial blood. The machine seized. A fire alarm blared as the fluid hit a hot welding tip and ignited. Fire! Fire on line 2, Miguel screamed, grabbing an extinguisher. The crew battled the small blaze, destroying thousands of dollars of raw material with chemical foam. Troy stood frozen on the deck. His face was pale. The efficiency boost had just turned into a catastrophic failure. An hour later, the damage report came in. Robot Axis 3 destroyed. Replacement cost $22,000. Hydraulic clamp total loss. Cost $6,000. Downtime estimate 48 hours minimum. And then the phone rang. Wasn't the internal line. It was the red phone on the wall of the manager's office. The bat phone. It was the CEO, Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson was a man who didn't understand code, but he understood numbers. And he had a dashboard on his desk that showed real-time production output. That dashboard had just flatlined. I wasn't there, but word travels fast. The office walls at Grayspan are thin. Troy Henderson's voice boomed over the speakerphone. Why am I looking at a 0 on line 2? And why did I just get an automated alert about a fire suppression discharge? Sir, Troy stammered, his voice cracking. We encountered a minor hardware anomaly during the migration. A sensor malfunction. A sensor? Henderson barked. We replaced those sensors 6 months ago. Elaine handled that project. She told me they were good for 5 years. The name hung in the air like a curse. Elaine. Well, Elaine isn't here to verify that, Troy deflected. And frankly, her legacy configuration might have masked the defect. Masked it or managed it, Henderson asked. He was sharp. You don't get to be CEO without knowing how to smell BS, even if you don't know how to fix the toilet. I was told this transition would be seamless. You told me Elaine was redundant. Right now, that redundancy looks like it's costing me 30 grand an hour. It's a hiccup, sir, just a hiccup. We'll have it back online by second shift. I have the team on it. You better, Henderson growled. Because if we miss the shipment for Ford on Friday, it's not going to be a sensor we replace. The line went dead. Troy slammed the receiver down. He turned to the IT lead, a kid named Kevin, different Kevin. This one wore skinny jeans. Fix it. Why did the override fail? It didn't fail, sir, Kevin whispered. It did exactly what you told it to. It ignored the error. But, looking at the logs, there was a secondary command. What secondary command? Right before the crash, Kevin pointed a screen full of scrolling red text. The system tried to access a subroutine called SafetyNet v4. It's an old file, but the path was blocked because we revoked the user permissions for the author. Who was the author? Kevin gulped. E. Miller. Troy stared at the screen. He wiped sweat from his forehead. Scrub it, he hissed. Delete all references to her files. Build a new safety patch from scratch. I don't want her ghost haunting my machines. Sir, writing a new safety kernel from scratch takes weeks. You have until tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, in Traverse City, I was walking along the bay. The water was cold and blue. I found a nice smooth stone and skipped it across the surface. 4 skips. Not bad for a woman with arthritis. I wasn't checking my phone constantly, but I checked it enough. I saw the error logs piling up on my remote viewer. I saw the frantic attempts by the IT team to write code that I had perfected over a decade. I saw them making rookie mistakes, syntax errors, loop failures, variable mismatches. They were trying to learn a language I had invented without a dictionary. I felt a twinge of guilt, not for Troy, he could rot, but for the machines. I hated seeing them abused, and for the guys on the floor. Miguel was probably working a double shift right now, cleaning up hydraulic fluid. But I knew this had to happen. If I went back now, if I called and offered to help, Troy would take the credit. He'd say he managed the consultant. He'd learn nothing. No, the lesson had to be expensive. It had to hurt. I went back to my sister's house. She was making lasagna. "How's retirement?" she asked, pouring me a glass of red. Loud, I smiled, very loud. I slept like a baby that night. I assumed didn't sleep at all. By Wednesday morning, the factory felt like a hospital ward where the patient is crashing and the doctors are arguing over the textbook. Line 2 was still down. Line 1 was running at half speed because the operators were terrified to push the buttons. And Troy looked like he had aged 10 years in 48 hours. His suit was wrinkled. The confidence was gone, replaced by a manic, desperate energy. The IT team, let's call them the clean squad, had spent the night trying to scrub my digital DNA from the mainframe. They were trying to perform an exorcism on a hard drive. We deleted the e-Miller user profile, Kevin the IT guy reported, his eyes red-rimmed from staring at monitors. But every time we reboot the main server to apply the changes, the profile restores itself. How is that possible? Troy demanded, chugging his fifth energy drink. It's a computer, doesn't have a soul. It's the architecture, sir, Kevin said, pulling up a schematic that looked like a bowl of spaghetti thrown at a wall. See this? The core kernel, the thing that tells the factory I am a factory, it has a dependency. It checks for master signature on boot up. If it doesn't find the architect key, it initiates a system restore from a hidden partition to prevent data corruption. And the architect key is Elaine's personal encryption token, Kevin said. He didn't just write the patches, sir. She wrote the bootloader. She built the operating system that the new ERP is trying to sit on top of. We're not upgrading a program. We're trying to do a brain transplant on a patient who is awake and fighting back. Troy slammed his fist on the desk. Then wipe it, format the drives, factory reset. The room went deadly silent. A grizzled technician named Stan, who had been there since the factory opened in the 90s, spoke up from the back. "You don't want to do that, son." "Excuse me?" Troy snapped. "Factory reset," Stan said, chewing on a toothpick. "You think that means clean slate? In this place, factory default means the settings from 1998. It means DOS prompts. It means the robotic arms forget they have hands. It means you lose the calibration data for every single machine on the floor." It took Elaine 6 years to dial that in. "I don't care about 1998, Troy yelled. "I have a cloud backup of the current settings." "The cloud backup that failed to sync because of the latency issues?" Stan asked dryly. Troy paused. He looked at the server rack. He looked at the red numbers on the production board. He was cornered. A smart man would have stopped. A smart man would have called the one person who could fix it and begged. But Troy wasn't smart. He was proud. Pride is the most expensive commodity in business. "Do it," Troy whispered. "Factory reset. Wipe the legacy partition. We rebuild from the ground up. Today, sir, that will take the whole plant offline," Kevin warned, "not just line 2, everything. The lights, the HVAC, the door locks, do it," Troy screamed. "I am in charge here. Burn it down if you have to, just get her out of the system." Kevin typed the command. His hands were shaking. Command, format C, /system root /force warning. This action is irreversible. Proceed. Y/N he pressed Y, then enter. The screens in the control room flickered. Then they went black. The hum of the server fans died down. Out on the floor, the lights buzzed and cut out. The emergency sodium lamps kicked in, bathing the silent factory in a sickly orange glow. The conveyor belts stopped with a lurch. The air compressors winded down with a long, mournful hiss. Silence. Absolute dead silence. Troy smiled there. "It's done, now boot up the new image." Kevin pressed the power button. The server's word, text scrolled across the screen. "Booting, loading OS, error, boot device not found. Error, HALDLL missing. Error, system architect signature required." "What?" Troy leaned in. "What is that?" It wiped the OS, Kevin whispered. "But the BIOS, the motherboard firmware. It's still looking for her signature. Won't accept the new image because it doesn't recognize the authority." Bypass it. I can't. It's hardware encoded. She flashed the chips physically. Suddenly, a message popped up on the main screen. It wasn't a system error. It was a text message routed through the emergency notification gateway. Message from Admin Ghost Body. Did you just try to format my brain, Troy? That was rude. Troy stared at the screen, his mouth open. She's watching us, Kevin whispered, terrified. It's in the walls. She's not a ghost. Troy shrieked. She's a hacker. Trace the signal. Call the police, Sir Stan said, standing up and putting on his coat. She's not hacking. You just tried to break into a house she built and you triggered the burglar alarm. I'm going home. Call me when you hire an adult. Stan walked out. The rest of the team looked at each other. The factory was dead. The screens were black. And somewhere in Michigan, a 58-year-old woman was probably chuckling. I wasn't chuckling, actually. I was eating a grape, but the satisfaction was deep and nourishing. I saw the system offline notification on my phone. He had done the unthinkable. He had nuked the site. Now he had nothing. No old system, no new system. Just millions of dollars of silent metal and a board of directors meeting scheduled for tomorrow. It was time to turn the screw. Thursday morning. The factory had been dark for 16 hours. Silence was starting to attract attention. Delivery trucks were lined up at the loading docks, engines idling, drivers confused because the electronic gates wouldn't open. The just-in-time supply chain was quickly becoming not in time. My phone rang at 7 o'clock a.m. It was Miguel. Elaine, you need to answer, please. His voice was tight, bordering on panic. I'm here, Miguel, I said, calm. What's happening? He's lost his mind, Elaine. Try. He's trying to bypass the digital lockouts mechanically. He's got a crew of scabs, contractors he hired overnight, and they're down in the power cage. They're hot wiring the main bus to bypass the logic controllers. I sat up straight. Hot wiring? Miguel, that's 480 volts. If they bypass the phase sequence protection. I know, I told him. If they switch the phases, the motors will run backward. The pumps, the fans, everything. Hydraulic presses will try to push up instead of down. It'll tear the place apart. Where are you? I'm in the parking lot. I evacuated my guys. I'm not letting my team die for his bonus. But Elaine, the morning shift is still inside. They're in the break room waiting for the power to come back. My blood ran cold. Running motors backward wasn't just expensive, it was a bomb. If the ventilation fans ran in reverse, they'd pull exhaust fumes back into the plant. If the heavy presses cycled wrong, they could shatter, sending shrapnel through the walls. Put him on, I said. He won't talk to you. He smashed his phone when the CEO called again. Okay, I said. My mind raced. I couldn't stop him physically. I couldn't log in, he had formatted the servers. But the hard-coded BIOS. The ghost partition that Stan had mentioned. It had one final failsafe, dead man's switch I had programmed years ago in case of a catastrophic cyber attack or a hostile takeover of the controls. It listened for a specific command on the cellular emergency band. A command that would trigger a physical lockout of the main breakers. It would blow the fuses. It would cost $10,000 in fuses, but it would kill the power before Troy could kill the workers. Miguel, listen to me, I said. Get everyone back. Further back. To the fence line. What are you going to do? I'm going to pull the plug. Permanently, I hung up. I opened my messaging app. I had a contact saved as GracePen main bus. It was a cellular modem wired directly into the master breaker panel. I typed the word, one word, no punctuation, no emotion. Execute. I hovered my thumb over the send button. I imagined Troy in the power cage, sweating, screaming at some poor contractor to jam a copper bar into the terminals. Imagined the sparks. I imagined the silence. I pressed send, sent, delivered. 300 miles away, inside the dark, cavernous chest of GracePen Industries, a tiny relay clicked. Click. Then a thunderclap, boom. It wasn't an explosion of fire. It was the sound of 3 massive, industrial-grade fuses blowing simultaneously. It was the sound of 10,000 amps of electricity hitting a brick wall. The lights in the parking lot flickered and died. Hum of the backup generators cut out. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was absolute. The factory was stone dead. Inert, a tomb. My phone buzzed immediately. Miguel, holy, Elaine, the whole substation just blew. There's smoke coming from the power shed. Is everyone okay? Yeah. The contractors came running out like their pants were on fire. They're yelling that the panel exploded. It didn't explode, I said, pouring the rest of my tea down the sink. It tripped. Hard way? Try can't hotwire a melted fuse. You saved them, Miguel breathed. But Elaine, the CEO just pulled up. His limo is at the gate. He's seeing the smoke. Good, I said. Tell him I said hello. The factory was safe. It was broken, expensive, and completely offline, but it wasn't going to kill anyone. Troy's modernization was officially over. Now came the cleanup. And the cleanup required a janitor who knew where the broom was kept. I went to my closet and pulled out my work boots. I brushed a speck of dust off the toe. Showtime, I whispered. The cost of downtime in a Tier 1 automotive supplier is calculated in seconds. Specifically, at Grayspen, it was roughly $85 per second. When I sent that text, I didn't just blow a fuse. I burned a pile of cash the size of a minivan. By the time the smoke cleared from the power shed, the losses were astronomical. Missed shipments, $150,000. Contract penalties, $75,000. Blown main fuses and damaged switching gear, $50,000. That $50,000 was the cherry on top. It was the direct result of Troy's stupidity meeting my fail-safe. Mr. Henderson, the CEO, stood in the parking lot. He was wearing a cashmere coat that cost more than Miguel's truck. He was staring at the blackened door of the power shed. Troy was standing next to him, covered in soot, looking like a chimney sweep who had just been caught stealing silver. Explain, Henderson said. His voice wasn't loud. It was terrifyingly quiet. It was sabotage. Troy spluttered. I told you, she hacked us. She blew the power remotely. This is domestic terrorism. Henderson turned to look at Troy. Sabotage or a safety lockout? I spoke to the fire marshal, Henderson interrupted. Said the fuses blew because the system detected an illegal phase sequence. He said if those fuses hadn't blown, the main turbines would have exploded. He said whoever triggered that lockout saved this building. Troy gaped. But she didn't hack you, Troy. She stopped you from committing negligent homicide. Henderson pulled out his phone. And now, we have a dead factory. The IT team says the servers are wiped. The maintenance team says the power is physically severed. You are done, sir. I can fix this. You need to leave, Henderson said now, before I call the legal department and ask them if I can sue you for the GDP of a small country. Get off my property. Troy slumped. He looked at the factory one last time, his conquest, his failure, and walked toward his BMW. He didn't look back. Henderson turned to Miguel. Can you get the power back on? I can replace the fuses, sir, Miguel said, crossing his arms. But the system, the brains, it's gone. Troy wiped it. Even if we get power, the machines won't know what to do. They're lobotomized, so we're dead in the water. Unless, Miguel trailed off. Unless what? Unless you call the architect. Henderson sighed. He rubbed his temples. He knew he had lost. He knew he had to eat crow. A large, feathery, unseasoned crow. Do you have her number? I do, Miguel smiled. My phone rang at 11 o'clock a.m. Let it go to voicemail. It rang again at 11:05 a.m. Voicemail. At 11:10 a.m., a text came through. From Henderson. Body, name your price. I waited 10 minutes. Then I replied, Body, I'm retired, but I do consulting. My rate is triple my old salary, and I want a written apology. Not to me, to the machine. The response was immediate. Body, done. When can you be here, Body? I'm 3 hours away. Don't touch anything. I got in my truck. I didn't rush. I stopped for coffee. I listened to an audiobook. I enjoyed the drive. When I pulled up to the gate, the guard, Kevin, saluted me. Actually saluted. Welcome back, ma'am. Open the gate, Kevin, manually. I assume the electronics are fried. Yes, ma'am. I drove up to the main entrance. Henderson was waiting. He looked humble. That was a new look for him. Elaine, he said, extending a hand. Mr. Henderson, I nodded. I didn't shake his hand. I walked past him, straight toward the server room. Let's see how bad he broke my toys. The server room was dark, lit only by the flashlights of the IT team. They looked at me like I was the Messiah returning in a flannel shirt. Boot it up, I said to Kevin, the IT guy. We can't, he said. The OS is gone. The drives are blank. The drives you can see are blank, I corrected. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the USB drive. One Troy had watched me pack up. The personal files. I plugged it into the main console. A tiny green light blinked. Power, I commanded. But the fuses, Miguel said from the doorway. I bypassed the main breaker physically on my way in, I said. We have auxiliary power. Hit the switch. Miguel threw a lever. The fans roared to life. The screens flickered. And then a beautiful thing happened. Reading USB. Signature found. E. Miller. Decrypting legacy partition. Storing system state. Pre-try. Green bars filled the screens. The code cascaded down like rain. It was messy. It was old. It was spaghetti code, but it was alive. System restoring, Kevin whispered. It's all coming back. The calibration data, the timing maps, everything. I turned to Henderson. The factory is confused. It had a stroke. It needs to relearn how to walk. That will take me about 2 weeks of babysitting. Whatever you need, Henderson said. Bleeding money? Contract, I said. Consultant basis. $250 an hour. Minimum 6-month retainer and Troy's office. I want it turned into a break room for the floor staff, with a good coffee machine. Henderson didn't even blink. Deal. I turned back to the screen. I typed in my password. Welcome back, architect. Okay, I cracked my knuckles. Let's make some cars. Getting the lights back on was the easy part. Convincing the machines to trust us again was the hard part. For the next 3 days, I practically lived on the floor. I slept on a cot in the engineering office. I drank terrible coffee, and I loved every minute of it. The modernization was scrapped. The cloud servers were disconnected. We went back to the local loop, my loop. The IT kids watched me work like I was performing magic tricks. Wait, Kevin asked one night as I was recalibrating line 3, using a MIDI interface. Like, for music, the timing protocol for these old Kuka robots is remarkably similar to a drum machine, I explained, tweaking a variable. You want them to stay in rhythm, you treat them like a jazz band, not a spreadsheet. He took notes. He was learning, that was good. Maybe in 10 years, he'd be a wizard too. On Friday afternoon, the plant was back at 90% capacity. We had missed a few shipments, but we were alive. The bleed had stopped. Mr. Henderson called a town hall meeting on the floor. He stood on a crate, a humble crate, not a stage. I want to apologize, he said to the weary workers. I listened to the wrong voice. I thought new meant better. I forgot that experience is the only thing you can't download. He looked at me. Elaine has agreed to stay on as our senior systems architect. She answers only to me. There was applause, real applause, not the polite golf clap kind, the whistling, hooting kind from guys missing fingernails. But I wasn't done. One more thing, I said, stepping up. Mr. Henderson, you owe someone an apology. I just apologized to the team, he said, confused. Not the team, I pointed to line 3, the robot arm that Troy had smashed, now repaired with shiny new parts but still looking a bit scarred. Her, the machine, you let a stranger hurt her. You let him override her instincts. Tell her you're sorry. The floor went silent. Henderson looked at me. He looked at the robot. He looked at the faces of the workers who spent more time with these machines than with their wives. He realized I wasn't joking. This was the culture. You respect the iron. He walked over to the safety cage. He placed a hand on the yellow metal. I'm sorry, he mumbled. Louder, I said. I'm sorry, he shouted. Line 3 hissed and completed a perfect weld. Sparks flew. It looked like a nod. Accepted, I said. Later that afternoon, I was in the office, my new office, which was actually my old desk but with a much more comfortable chair, when Henderson came in with the legal team. They had the new contract. It's all standard, the lawyer said. Just sign here. Actually, I said, pulling a document out of my bag. There is one small detail we need to address. The intellectual property. What do you mean? 12 years ago, I said, sliding a yellowed piece of paper across the desk. When I built the Ghost operating system for this plant, the company didn't want to pay for the software license from Siemens. It was too expensive. So, the previous CEO, God rest his cheap soul, asked me to write a custom solution. I pointed to a paragraph at the bottom. He signed this. It states that the custom code, the Ghost architecture, remains the intellectual property of the creator, me. It is licensed to Grayspan for a fee of $1 per year, as long as I am employed here. The lawyer picked up the paper. His eyes widened. And I continued, if my employment is terminated, the license is revoked immediately. And any use of the software becomes copyright infringement, punishable by, well, you do the math, you mean? Henderson paled. When Troy fired you. He inadvertently made the entire factory operation illegal, I smiled. Technically, for the last 3 days, you've been pirating my brain. What do you want? Henderson asked. He knew he was beaten. I don't want to sue you, I said. I like this place. I want a new clause. The license is permanent, as long as I have veto power over any future optimization directors. No one touches my code without my permission. Ever. Done, Henderson said instantly. Is that it? And I want a reserved parking spot. Next to the door. My knees aren't what they used to be. Henderson laughed. It was a nervous laugh, but it was real. You got it, Elaine. I signed the contract. 6 months later, the factory hums. It's a different sound now. It's deeper, richer. Maybe it's my imagination, or maybe it's the new bearings we installed in the main drive, but the place sounds happy. Troy landed on his feet, of course. Guys like that always do. He's a consultant for digital transformation at some logistics firm in Ohio. I give it 6 months before their trucks start driving into rivers. But that's not my problem. I'm sitting in the control booth, the crow's nest, overlooking the floor. I have a mug of tea Earl Grey, hot, and a monitor that shows every heartbeat of the plant in glorious, low-resolution green text. Kevin, who is now officially systems junior architect, is down on the floor, walking a group of interns through the sensor array on line 2. I can hear him over the radio. Now, don't trust the auto-calibration, he's telling them. Listen to the servo. If it whines, it's thirsty. If it clicks, it's angry. Respect the machine. I smile. The kid is all right. My phone buzzes. It's a notification from the bank. The consulting retainer cleared. It's a ridiculous amount of money. I bought a boat. I don't even like fishing, but I like sitting on things that float. Miguel waves up at me from the floor. He points to the clock. It's 3:00 p.m., shift change. The bell rings. The first shift streams out, tired and dirty. The second shift streams in, fresh and caffeinated. It's the tide, in and out. I look at the main console. The ghost system is running perfectly. Uptime 4,320 hours, 0 faults. I type in a command, just checking the logs. Status, optimal. Architect, E. Miller. Could retire for real. I could take the money and move to Florida. I could never smell hydraulic fluid again. But then I look at line 3. She's moving with that hypnotic rhythm. Thrum click whoosh, she's dancing. And I know that if I leave, eventually, someone will come along who doesn't know the steps. Someone who thinks new is always better. Someone who forgets that legacy doesn't mean old, it means survived. I'm not going anywhere. I'm the ghost in the machine. And this house is haunted. I lean into the microphone. All right, second shift. Let's have a good run. Safety first. Don't touch the red buttons. I press the enter key, one sharp click. Execute start sequence. The lights brighten. The hum rises to a roar. The factory breathes, and so do I.
Office battles aren't won in meetings, but in silence after the meeting ends. This one was a reminder that timing is everything. Thanks for listening out. More stories ahead.